Well, let's get some reaction and insight now from Fatah Central Committee's Deputy Secretary General, Sabri Saidam, who joins us now here on RT International. Thank you for your time. We know Donald Trump has got these very close ties with the Israeli Prime Minister, who has admitted that this 20-point plan essentially achieves all of Israel's war objectives. In that case, what incentive is there for Hamas to accept this plan?
Well, it's good to be with you. Just to correct, my name is Sabri Saidam. What I want to say is that the plan, the so-called plan proposed by Trump, is nothing but an outline for a framework of work for the future without any details. Every item almost needs extra details, and there's a lot of ambiguity related to such a plan. With it, for example, Trump talked about statehood, and Netanyahu says no to a Palestinian state, talked about a role for the Palestinian Authority once it achieves reform, as he said. Netanyahu says otherwise. So I think it is marred with ambiguity, and for that reason, maybe, since I don't speak for Hamas, but maybe this is what is pushing Hamas to take its time in reviewing the entire outline, as it were.
Yeah, part of this plan is talking about this international board of peace that essentially Trump would be heading, and this would be overseeing the transition to Gaza's government. The US is Israel's biggest ally. It has been since Israel was created. Given that case, is it possible that the US can guarantee what's needed here, which is a neutral approach?
Not at all. I think, with your proposition and with your introduction, it's clear that there is no neutrality whatsoever. Israel is close to America. America is close to Israel. So no matter what it takes, nobody around the world will ever consider this to be fair and square. If anything, it may be resurrecting colonization and the past of colonial rule of the Middle East by establishing the board that is to rule Gaza, by establishing a committee with Palestinians, but there's international experts. Palestinians have a lot of questions, and that's why we said we welcome the initiative for ending the war. We welcome the initiative for not annexing the West Bank. We welcome the initiative not displacing Palestinians for sure, and we welcome any initiative. But imagine if Russia was on board, things would have been more balanced. If the world was on board, it would have been more balanced. Moreover, remember the Riviera project that Trump talked about? Many Palestinians, I heard them yesterday, say that, is this sort of recycled plan for Riviera, since it has an economic dimension to it? Remains to be seen. That's why I said, it is marred with ambiguity, needs a lot of details, and I think the time ahead, if Hamas accepts, will be, time that is filled with endless meetings for clarifying almost every item that appears on the plan, as it were.
Yeah, it's interesting you say it would be more balanced if Russia was involved. We heard from the Russian foreign minister yesterday, Sergei Lavrov, that Russia has not been consulted at all with these plans. This really is sort of a Trump-Netanyahu plan. But I want to pick up on what you said there about colonialization, because one of the names touted to essentially be the Gaza governor is Tony Blair, widely regarded by many in the Middle East as being a war criminal. This is a man who was also appointed as the special envoy to the Middle East back in, I think it was almost a decade ago now. And he was charged with bringing peace to the region. That clearly didn't happen. We saw continued attacks on Gaza during his tenure as a special envoy. What do you think he brings to the table now, given his failure so far?
Well, that's one of the items that's worrying many Palestinians, and to be honest, worrying a lot of people around the world, mainly the British themselves, who have been long questioning the integrity of Mr. Blair. Furthermore, he is dealing with Netanyahu, who is considered a war criminal, who is being issued a warrant by the International Court of, by the International Criminal Court, rather, and has been indicted by the International Court of Justice. So, is it a scene that is governed by a bunch of people who are considered to be war criminals to untangle a situation that is extremely volatile and extremely complex? I doubt it. That's why there's a lot of questions related to the involvement of Tony Blair. Moreover, for Palestinians, the Tony Blair inclusion has been the brainchild of Kushner, who was considered to be the mastermind behind the so-called Abrahamic Accord, which Trump was flittering with, saying Abrahamic or Ibrahim or whatever. Even that was subjected to his jokes, is something that is of great worry for Palestinians and the world alike. Yes, Blair is not in any way considered to be neutral. Blair has had his history, and it is all doubtful. That's why I say, we welcome any initiative to save Palestinian blood. We welcome any initiative that does not lead towards annexation of the West Bank. We welcome any initiative that will not lead towards the displacement of our people. But there is a lot of, kind of mixture of things that have been included in such a plan: the economic dimension, the political dimension, the exclusion dimension that appears to be so, by excluding Palestinians from governing the scene. I mean, people should be allowed to manage their own destiny. After all, America was the one to have said that, Gaza should be led by Palestinians. Where are the Palestinians in the formula? I wonder.
Yeah, Palestinians also being denied access to the UN because the US revoking visas. I want to go back to the plan now, because under that 20-point plan, the IDF would be expected to withdraw from Gaza. Now, Trump says Netanyahu has signed up to his plan, but we've also heard from Netanyahu that that is essentially out of the question. Do you think, given that you've already stated that there is a problem here with neutrality when it comes to the US being in control of this, that Israel will be held accountable to the same standards as Hamas if it doesn't abide by the plan?
Yeah, exactly so. And this should be the question of neutrality again, and the question of integrity of such an outline. So we say we welcome, but we have a lot of questions. And I think a lot of Israelis also have a lot of questions. The idea is to bring peace to the region. And if you remember, Trump, at the outset of his press conference, had said that he is introducing a plan for the Middle East, a plan that is going to bring peace finally to the Middle East. I wonder if the recipe he has proposed really leads towards comprehensive peace. So again, many questions, and I think this so-called plan has proposed more questions than answers. Remains to be seen, but let me say that it was with great disappointment that Netanyahu was allowed to be given the podium, whilst the Palestinians, the victims, were deprived from being there. And moreover, it is questionable as to why the UN, who is the owner and who is the master of the International Court of Justice, who issued, an indicting, verdict against Netanyahu and his government, would ever undermine its own court by allowing Netanyahu to do so. Again, very ambiguous situation, very weird situation, and the Palestinians are already asking too many questions about it.
We're coming up to a fairly tragic date, almost 2 years since the onslaught in Gaza began. We have reported in that almost 24 months of the devastation, and we have seen that increasingly becoming worse. We hear about the famine that's now been declared by the WHO in the sector. We've seen the rubble, the ruins of cities. We've spoken to those who've been displaced over and over, unable to access medical treatment, or medical treatment and facilities almost non-existent. If this plan goes through, if it's accepted by Hamas and it's followed through by the Israelis, how will that change for those on the ground who are suffering?
I think this ought to be put forward to the American administration that had said that this plan will bring in a new reality. Palestinians are worried, super worried, that whatever Trump is promising, Netanyahu is not delivering. And I already used two examples on the issue of the Palestinian Authority running the Gaza Strip, and on the issue of the return of that authority to the work on the ground. Moreover, the establishment of a Palestinian state. So when Trump says yes, Netanyahu says no, and that's actually what worries a lot of Palestinians.
Yeah, I just want to talk about Trump expressing this interesting developing Gaza. You spoke about this a few minutes ago, about it being turned into essentially this economic hub. We've seen the plans. It's something that Trump and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, are very interested in, this Riviera of the Middle East. What do you make of that interest and those plans to potentially develop Gaza in this way?
Well, let me say what has been mentioned on documents and what's been mentioned in the so-called plan is one thing. What Trump had said in the press conference is another. He had said that, how come Israel? I don't know how Israel had given up Gaza. It is an amazing peace on the ocean and what have you. That means, his economic appetite is still there and the Riviera project is still there. That's why I say, we fear tremendously that the plan, but nothing but a resurrection of the old formula whereby we have colonization resurrected and we have the Riviera project now with Trump leading the so-called Peace Council he's establishing, being brought to the scene again. So with these suggestions, I think, Palestinians stand idle to watch as to how things are going to unfold. In any way, we have an interesting 3 days ahead. Things are up in the air. Everything remains to be seen. And we will await as to how this situation is going to untangle.
That's why we are encouraged.
Yeah, you said interesting few days ahead because Hamas has been given this deadline by Donald Trump. We know that the organization is looking at that plan. What alternatives are there, not just for Palestinians, but also Hamas, if it rejects that plan?
We heard the threats from Trump. My biggest worry is that the people of Gaza bombardment is still ongoing. In fact, from here, I can hear the raids still ongoing in Gaza. And it is unclear as to how is this going to be handled. Moreover, the question of handing the weapons to who, when, how is this going to be implemented? The question of cessation of hostility and a retraction to the lines or withdrawal to the lines drawn by Trump's map is going to happen. When would this happen? There's nobody holding fire so far. So I fear the people are going to be the victim yet again. And the destruction of Gaza is going to be widened. If anything, today, this morning, Israel has told Gazans that they can go one way on Rashid Street, meaning that they can go south, but they cannot go back, which means that the influx of food and aid towards Gaza City is amputated as of today. So the pressure is still mounting and the military occupation is still ongoing. So how is this conducive to an atmosphere by which Hamas or others are going to accept that there is a different reality that's going to come into being?
Yeah, it's very hard, I think, for both sides to put trust in the other. We've seen that problem time and time again. The UN is urging both sides to agree to this plan. I just wondered, many have described the UN not being fit for purpose anymore, 80 years since it was founded, being toothless, full of hot air. Is it possible that the UN can provide any guarantees for both parties in this conflict or not?
Well, not really. We have heard Guterres many times, the Secretary General, complain about what he had not said, but rather the incompetence and the inability of the UN to intervene and do what it desires to do. Moreover, UNRWA has been a straight example to the impetus that the UN is suffering from. Imagine if this council that Trump is talking about, the so-called Council for Peace, he desires to put together for Gaza, was headed by the Secretary General. I think that would be a call for comfort for Palestinians and a call for believing that this is nothing but a neutral formula. So I would say it's a shame that the UN is standing still. It's a shame that there is double standards. We have said it many times. When it came to Russia, there were steps taken almost immediately. when it came to Israel, Israel still enjoying the participation at the Eurovision, for example, still enjoying the participation in sports activities and tournaments around the world, and the World Cup is drawing closer. So, this double standard of dealing with things is testimony to the fact that the UN is incompetent, as unable also to intervene and push ahead the formula that it was created to deliver, which is the formula of peace, of holding guns, of managing the world so to turn it into a better inhabitable space for humanity to prosper.
We'll need to leave it there, but thank you very much for your time. That's Fatah Central Committee's Deputy Secretary General, Sabri Saidam.